Mistakes and failures are a huge part of life, but you don't have to let it define you. Using those failures as fuel to change propels you to take action and transform your life. Join me, Mark Hugentobler, as I interview people who have experienced the rock bottom of the criminal justice system and see how they turn their failures into success, stories that will motivate you and change your life. Jordon Holdaway was born with a rebellious spirit. Mix that with some difficult circumstances in his life, and it was a recipe for disaster. At about 10, he had the great idea of selling pies to all the people in the neighborhood. Never mind that he had no intention of delivering any of the pies. Finding his identity and going against the grain, his single mother could do little to rein him in. Finding drugs in his later teens, he continued down the rebellious road into a life of drugs and crime and violence. Facing another very long prison term, he convinced a public prosecutor to allow him to go to the Other Side Academy in Salt Lake City, Utah. There he found his way and came to himself, bringing out the potential that everyone had seen in him for so many years. Listen in as he tells his story, including some of the powerful change agents in the Other Side Academy. As we start our podcast today, we want to take a minute and thank our sponsors. First, the Other Side Academy, a therapeutic community in Salt Lake City, Utah, helping people that have been at the rock bottom of the criminal justice world become great members of society. Their success saves the state of Utah millions of dollars every year. Peaceful Prisons Project, a national nonprofit that helps formerly incarcerated reconnect with society in healthy ways. My Story Matters and Captain Your Story, an amazing program that, as described by its founder, Amy Chandler, helps all humans live a life of intention and purpose, helping them tackle the problems of everyday life. If you'd like to find out more about any of our sponsors, go to allmyfriendsarefelons.com and click on the link. Well, Jordon, we're really excited to have you on the show. I know we have some mutual friends, Tyler Hansen and Dave DeRocher. I know you've been very closely associated with the Other Side Academy for, I think, about 8 years. We're really excited to hear your story, hear about the Other Side Academy, and hear some of the things that you're doing now. But for right now, we'd like to start at the beginning. Tell us about your family, where you grew up, what that looked like, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. I'm the youngest of 3 siblings, so there's a significant age gap between me and my older brother and sister, about 10 years. And the reason for that is that my mom had an affair, and so I was the result of that. That was the beginnings of me. Mom and dad's relationship was rocky because of that situation. So when I say dad, I mean my brother and sister's father, because that was the father that I knew. Did never know the natural father. Was raised in an LDS family here in Kaysville, Utah, and so when that came about, that situation, there's a stigma with an adulterous relationship, and so mom and dad divorced for a couple of years, and then decided to get remarried. Tried to make it work out. Dad was a major in the Army, and so we traveled around. I don't know if that was just purely from his stationing, or if that was kind of asked to be stationed somewhere else to try to kind of get away from that thing. But we lived in St. Louis, Missouri, when I was from the ages of 2 to 6. So those are some of my first memories, is in St. Louis, Missouri. And then we moved to Pueblo, Colorado after that. And somewhere in that time frame, mom and dad divorced. Couldn't hold on. It was fighting. That's what I remember growing up, was screaming matches between mom and dad. Dad was very, he would come home, sit on the couch, read his newspaper, and would provide. And then, they'd end up picking a fight with each other about something. And so mom was very involved with us children, making sure that we were getting to where we needed to be. But she was definitely the nurturing figure. Dad was not a bad guy, was never like abusive or angry towards us, but just not there, just not really very loving.
Kind of disconnected.
Yeah. He was a military guy that went to work, did his due diligence, came home and sat on the couch and waited to do it the next day. And I don't know what that was like for him. I do have to say, in regards to him, he never treated me as though I wasn't his son. So I never got any less treatment. I think sometimes I may even got better treatment than my older brother and sister. So, in regards to him, but so their marriage finally breaks apart when I'm about 7 years old, and mom takes us back to Kaysville, where we had originated from, because they had a
She has family there, I guess.
yeah, her family was all from here, but they had also owned a home here, and so they had rented that
Mm.
home out while we were stationed, in the other states. And so she got the house, got the kids, brought us back here, and mom
Dad stayed in
was
Pueblo and stayed in the army doing his thing then.
yeah, he did, and then he ended up relocating back out to Salt Lake City a few years later. So
Okay.
he did travel back out there. He Both of them are Utah natives, my mom and dad. So both came from this area. Um,
Can I ask Jordan, when did you find out that he wasn't your biological dad?
I want to say it was probably somewhere around 4 or 5 years old. Where I was old
Pretty
enough.
young.
Yeah, where I was old enough to, obviously be able to understand the situation being explained to me, but obviously not internally understand, all
Yeah.
the situation. And remember it being kind of confusing. I remember my mom bringing me a picture of my real dad, and explaining to me, "Hey, this is your father," and kind of trying to talk through that. And mom was always willing to talk about things or express stuff, as far as teaching. She would explain something, and try to make it so. Um, yeah, so, but didn't have really any understanding of what that meant, right? But
Yeah.
this is my
Yeah.
dad. This is the guy that's
When
here.
you're yeah, this is the guy. I'm confused. That's really my dad, and right. So
Didn't understand what divorce was. Didn't understand what adultery
right.
was. Didn't understand any of those things. So
Yeah.
kind of a strange concept. So we came back here to Utah, to Kaysville, and mom was very. She wanted to get things done. She was about business. She was about taking care of her three kids, raising them. She wasn't one to ask for help. Um, she would oftentimes put up outside appearances that everything was great and everything was fine. Where she's stressed out the gate. She's going through emotional upheavals of trying to figure out how to raise three kids, how to make ends meet, and do that stuff. And she would at times work two. I think I even remember her working three jobs at a time, to make ends meet. And so, brother and sister, significantly older than me, like I said, they're going into high school, and in high school when I'm, first starting elementary school. So there's a gap there, right?
Right.
Um, Brother was, busy doing his thing. I remember my sister being a big part of my life. She was like a second mom figure, in a lot of ways, but also a teenager in high school. So she's doing her thing as well. And so mom's trying to figure out what to do with me, right? And that is, um, well, let me rewind that. So in school, elementary school, I start getting in trouble. That's when things probably first um, start manifesting, and it's not anything like too crazy. But by the time I'm in second or third grade, my teachers are telling my mom that they think I have a learning disorder, and probably from acting up in class, doing things for attention, different stuff like that. But for and I'm not doing my work. I'm not doing my schoolwork. And mom's, at home, she's trying to go through that stuff, but she's also taxed with work and stuff. So maybe not getting the full attention that a kid would get with schoolwork help from a mom that was just like
Right.
a stay-at-home mom. But still, mom's super intelligent. Uh, Able to give me some of those lessons and stuff. So don't know what the real disconnect is there until later on. But so teachers are expressing to my mom, maybe he's got a learning disorder or a disability. Maybe he needs to be put in a resource class. And my mom says, there's just no way. There's no way my kid's not doesn't have a learning disability. She says, so test him. And so they test me and come back that I was actually probably a little bit higher on the IQ scale than below it. It was that I wasn't being challenged by the work and stuff. And so in fourth grade, um, I get transferred to a gifted program. And
So that's just the opposite end of the scale.
yeah, yeah. So going
Special
from,
needs to gifted.
yep, leading into gifted, and that was a crazy, experience. Did that fourth, fifth, and sixth grade for 3 years, and we were going up to like the University of Utah and watching cows get heart transplants at the Jarvik, place, and
Oh, really? That'd be
oh
kind of fun.
yeah, and doing like architectural builds with bridges and doing college level math in fifth and sixth grade and stuff and learning those things. And so that, but I continued to get in trouble in school. I continued to act out. I continued to be, um, a handful for the teachers and stuff. And so mom is trying to figure some of that stuff out. And we were LDS, and I let me rewind that a little bit too. So, being a kid without a dad in the LDS religion, especially then in the late '80s, um, early '90s. Mom has returned back to the same neighborhood that the affair has taken place. So the whole congregation of the church is aware of the situation. She's gone through the process of repentance or whatever with the church. But here we are, right? There's a stigma, and I want to say I was probably one of only two families in our neighborhood and in our ward congregation that had a single parent mom, and a mom that's committed adultery, done the whole deal. And so there was a weird atmosphere to things that at that age I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand, but there was this feeling of being an outsider that is taking place in my life. Um, at this point, I remember being in Boy Scouts and making Father's Day cards as one of the activities, right? And the other kids in the pack saying, "Well, why are you making that? You don't even have a dad," and those things like that were not really understanding what it was at the time, but feeling on the outside. And mom also, like I said, would try to keep up appearances on the outside while the inside of the house, she's going through emotional, upheavals from being stressed out of trying to deal with stuff. And so everything just kind of feels discombobulated. I don't know. And so I think
Well,
that's,
and back in the '80s, that was a very unusual situation.
yeah. And I think that's the time where you've got a lot of kids being diagnosed with ADD early on and that type of stuff,
Yeah.
and so they're always making these suggestions. And my mom was an adamant, no, there's nothing wrong with his mental health. There's these types of things. Mom was, you're not going to the doctor unless something's falling off. That's so that was kind of the atmosphere that I was raised in on one hand. Going to the gifted school was awesome. I got challenged. I did well as far as academics, but like I said, I would get in trouble. And with mom's absence, being at work all the time, she's trying to figure out ways to correct my behavior. There's no dad in the home, as far as for discipline. And I was sneaky. I was a sneaky kid. I was firing on all cylinders upstairs, and so forging report cards or notes back and forth from the teacher and mom were things that I started doing. My mind would take those things apart. I'd have a note that I'd need to take home to express, where I'm falling short in my behavior or something like that, and I need to have it signed by my mom. And somewhere in there, my head clicks and goes, a signature is all that you need for validation of stuff. Well, I bet I could make a copy of my mom's signature, and doing that type of stuff, corresponding back and forth to the point that the communication between teachers and parents isn't taking place because I'm intervening in the middle of it and creating this thing to it's blowing my mom's mind, right? Like she thinks she's going crazy. The teachers that I have think that they're going crazy, and here I am just supposed to be this innocent little 10, 11-year-old kid, and everybody,
That's high school behavior.
yeah,
I worked at high school for a lot of years, and that's not atypical what you're describing, but it's very atypical for a 10-year-old.
yeah. And there was an experience when I was about that age, probably 8 or 9 years old, um, where I had a friend and his mom worked for a bakery, right? And I saw these order forms sitting at their house, and it was for pies. And I took him, and we went door to door in the neighborhood and knocked on doors. And I had come up with this whole scheme of I'm selling pies for this, whatever to raise funds for this thing and do this or that. Would you guys be willing to order a pie? And I had the order forms and everything, filled it out, put there, and took the money from the neighbors in the neighborhood. And that's alarming, as I look back, because there was nobody teaching me this type of stuff. That stuff wasn't going on in my home. I wasn't watching programs that were, about crime but these were just things that were wired in me. And so looking,
And you were
mom,
you were
mom
10 years
busted.
old.
Yeah, I was 10 years old. Mom busted me. We were going to the mall or something, to go do something, and I'm getting in my closet and I'm pulling out this stack of cash that I have because I'm going to take it with me and I'm going to go to the arcade and blow it all on playing video games or something, right? And she says, "Where did you get that from?" And then this story comes out. She gets it, and mom drags me by the ear down to every neighbor, and I have to explain myself to everybody that I've done, and so. And looking back, I didn't see this then, but here's the adulterous mom in the neighborhood, the single mom in the neighborhood, having to drag her kid door to door to go explain. I didn't see it for what it was back then. What I must have put my mom through in these
That would have
moments.
been very hard for her.
Yeah, she's trying to do the best that she can and overcome these things. And it's not till years later that I realized it. And she would tell me, you were a handful growing up, and I go, well, I don't think I was that bad, but you know
You were.
yeah, now that I have a teenager myself, I understand what I put her through, because he's an angel compared to what I've done. So, and so that the gifted school thing goes on, fourth, fifth, sixth grade. Um, Again, I have behavior issues in that environment, but everybody's always just like, oh, he's just going through a rough time. He's got a single mom. He's all the reasons but they also see in me a level of potential, I think, and so they're always got these great teachers, got these counselors, got these other people that are stepping up and saying, hey, let's just get you around this bend. Let's just do this or that. And I feel like that closed up uh, pretty well going out of that gifted program. And and another thing that happened during that period of time was mom was trying to find things to keep me busy in the summer, right? Summertime, she's not around, she's working. So she would take me down to the YMCA down in Salt Lake City. And a lot of the kids at the YMCA were inner city kids that, probably had some multi generational dysfunction going on in their families. And so I'm getting exposed to that. And mom thinks it's, hey, we're taking him to a place where he's supervised. He's got these,
The
counselors.
YMCA. Everybody knows the YMCA,
Yeah, he's got
right?
activities to do. It's keeping him out of trouble. I know where he's at. I drop him off. I pick him up. But the time spent over those summers, and it was 3 summers in a row that I can remember. And I'm watching these kids as they're going down to the 7-Eleven and stealing stuff and getting arrested. And I bring that up because I remember this kid. His name was Brandon, and he was a couple years older than me, so he was probably 12, 13 years old. And I just remember seeing him in handcuffs in the counselor's office at the YMCA, and the police there with him, and he had gone down and stolen something from a 7-Eleven or something. But that something in that moment, I can still see it vividly today. Something in that moment, and the way the girls in the camp were looking at him like he was the bad boy, and something identified there. And so I started taking home, and they're listening to rap music. These kids, there was no way in my neighborhood or where I grew up, nobody was listening to rap music. Nobody was doing any of this stuff, and so I'm getting exposed to that in the late '80s, '90s. The gangster rap is becoming a thing, and so I'm taking that home with me, the verbiage, the language, and I can remember cussing in front of my friends that I lived with in Kaysville, and the shocked look on their face. You can't talk like that. You can't say those things. But I kept doing it. And shortly thereafter, what are they doing?
They follow in suit.
Yeah, they're starting to cuss. Some of them are going the one direction and keeping with the right thing, but I'm starting to rub off on these other kids. And So those are some of the lessons I'm picking up over this time. That if you would have asked me at the time, I could have never told you that. But looking back, that's what's going on. Um, and so I get out of the gifted program, headed into junior high. And the expectation as you got out of this gifted program was that you would go into junior high and you'd be taking advanced placement classes and you would be continuing on the path that you had. And for me, what I figured out was I could take the entry level classes and I could ace all of them. No problem, easy. Now I'm doing the math that's the seventh grade math that you would be, but I've already been doing algebra and geometry and stuff, and so I'm getting straight A's in all my classes. But I'm not pushing myself, and the reason that that's important is because I realized that if the A's are there and the things are going on like that, that you're keeping up appearances on the outside, right?
The pressure's on.
Yeah, people stay out of your business. They stay out of those things, and so that was the lesson that I learned. In that was how to cut corners and how to manipulate certain situations. And through junior high, I was, like I said, I was rebellious. I was less of a handful, I think, than I was as a younger kid. But that was probably just I'm starting to mature more, and so I'm starting to have more freedom to myself, if that makes sense. And so um, the natural and mom's disciplinary actions are not as effective, right? I'm 13, 14 years old. My mom's 5'1", and here I am. I'm starting to tower past her. I'm starting to get bigger than her, and she'd hit me with a belt when I was a kid. When it was severe enough consequences, it was bend over the bed, or I'm just going to start swinging, and having to take that stuff. And I remember at about age 13, I had gotten bigger than her, and she made the ultimatum: bend over the bed, or I'm going to start swinging. And I said, go ahead and do it. And so she did, and I took the belt from her, and I think I gave her a swat across the butt with it. And I said, "We're not doing this anymore," And so she's
Wow.
trapped. She's trapped in
Yeah,
this,
she's stuck.
and there's
Yeah.
and unwilling to really ask for help, unwilling to express what's going on. You know what I mean? And really be able to ask for that because I don't know if it's guilt from her own choices in the past, if it's shame, if it's whatever, but unwilling to really ask others for help with me. Um, So, of course, as you're going down this rebellious path, you're naturally going to come into contact with drugs and alcohol. That's an endeavor that's going to take place. Started off with
So,
smoke.
so when you were doing the YMCA thing in the summer, and then you were coming home,
Hmm.
you talked about some of your friends who kind of jumped on your bandwagon, and others who kind of said, "No, I don't want to get into that." So at that point, did there start to be a separation? Did you stop going to church, for example? Did you kind of create your own little uh, following, your own little gang of sorts?
I don't think I wouldn't say that there was like a huge separation. And let me rewind it back to that too, because as far as church went and those things, I enjoyed church up until I would say probably age 12 or 13 years old. And I was very scripture driven, and all the you're going through primary, you're
Primary
becoming
stuff. Yeah.
deacon, you're doing all those things, and I was very I paid attention. I listened to the lessons. I could repeat it back, and then I'd see myself get passed up. And I don't know if it had to do with the fact that I didn't have a father in the home, and you don't have that patriarchal kind of build around things, and you don't have dad in the priesthood groups and doing the stuff. I don't know. That would be a guess, but I know that I started to build a resentment at that time because I was like, wow, I can repeat line in scripture back to you what you guys have said to me. This kid over here isn't doing anything, but his dad's in the elders quorum, and he seems to always end up as the deacons quorum president and then the teachers quorum, and so there was this resentment thing that started to build. And so the shock value thing that I had started to learn started to take place into that. And then I would start poking holes in my religion that I was raised in, and I would do it I would learn, I would pay attention to the scripture and the doctrine and stuff just so I could find reasons to poke holes in it. and say, well, look, this doesn't make sense. And I would start doing that. And I would start doing that with my friends and other things. And some of the friends were like, you can't do that. You can't talk like that. You can't do those things. I mean, a good example of it is I had these two brothers that lived behind me. Uh, and we grew up all through these years together. And one brother was very adamant about living, a righteous life and responsibly and doing those things. And the other brother started to kind of follow down my path. The one brother, if you flash forward 20, 30 years later, he's a returned missionary, he's got a family, done all these other things. The other brother followed the path with me, and he's a recovered heroin addict. So,
Wow.
Seeing that, but at the time, was I trying to lead people astray?
No, you were just doing what you did.
Yeah, I was I
There was
was
yeah.
I was feeling a level of acceptance and purpose because I was getting attention for negative things that I was doing, and so
And we sometimes forget that with especially with kids. They're looking for attention, and if it's negative attention, it's still attention.
yeah, we
If
all
it's
want to,
discipline, if it's aggressive discipline, it's still attention, and it fills a need for them. So
yeah, and
interesting concept.
you want to belong to a tribe, you want to be. And for some reason I just wouldn't listen because people would tell me, my mom, school teachers, counselors, people in the church would tell me, do good things and good things will happen in your life. Make the next right decision, do all these things and good things will happen. But for some reason I had it in my head that there was a way to shoot a curve around that, right? Like I didn't have to do what somebody told me to do. I could figure out my own way to get to the goal, and that was something that was just ingrained in me. I was rebellious. um, I would question authority. I would you know push limits and boundaries, and I would kind of get off on watching teachers get frustrated and watching, you know, other parents scratch their head at some of the what I thought were really intelligent points that I would make about how life worked. As I look back now and I realize they were just like, wow, this kid's out in the
He's
night.
twisted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I used to think I was super clever, and so that led to naturally seeking drugs, because it was the thing you weren't supposed to do. I don't think there was. I don't know. I wasn't looking for like something to fill this big hole in myself, and drugs were the thing. It was
You
an
just wanted to be a rebel.
Yeah. I wanted. You
You
told me
you were a
not to.
rebel without a clue.
Yeah, I can remember the police officers, the dare cops in school explaining why you shouldn't do drugs and all the negative things that happen if you do that, and this. And I remember questioning it and saying, well, if all these bad things happen to you when you do this, then why are so many people doing it? That doesn't make sense to me.
There's a piece that
So
you didn't
yeah, there's
know.
something you're not telling me about this, right? And that was me. So 15 years old, start drinking alcohol, start
So
smoking weed.
did you go search that out yourself, or did you just kind of run into it with your new group, with your friends? How did you get to the alcohol?
Um, so I had a friend that got a job at a Maverick, like cleaning the store at night. After he was only 15, 16 years old too. So his dad somehow got him a job doing this, and so it was that thing. We're like, well, he's like, I can steal cigarettes. Should we try them? Yeah, why wouldn't we? I can steal some beer. Should we try it? Yeah, why wouldn't we? And so I think that was the first kind of in, investigation into it. And then I had a couple of those two brothers I was talking about. They had a older sister who got married, and her husband would invite us over to his office, and he kind of had this double life going on. He had these 900 numbers that he was managing, and these are LDS people. I think they were even married in the temple. He had these 900 numbers, and this is the early ages of the internet and stuff, so internet
Right.
porn stuff going on. And he would invite us over to drink, and he'd buy us alcohol. And nothing ever happened with that situation. But looking back now, I realize, probably what his intents were in a lot of ways. Um, you don't see that when you're a teenage kid. You just think this guy thinks I'm cool. because he's
Right. Yeah. I'm grown up. I'm an adult. I'm just like him.
yeah, he's in his 20s, and and so then you started experiencing stuff like that where this was the guy you'd call up and say, hey, will you go buy us a bottle of liquor for the weekend? We're going to go hang out and party up at this place. And it turned into that, and then you're seeking out um, the other kids at school, and at this time, by the time you're in high school, you know who people are, you know who's doing
Yeah.
what. The girls that are loose, that'll let you go and experiment sexually. You know the guys that are living life on the edge, and so you start building these rapport with these different groups of
Connections
people.
everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so started smoking marijuana. um, and once drugs and alcohol became a regular thing where it was beyond just an experiment, like the buddy stealing them from the Maverick, and we're testing it out. And I remember the first time I drank beer, I was like, this is the most disgusting thing I've ever
It's gross.
had. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was no appeal to it there. It was the social door that it opened,
Yeah.
that
I'm
really
cool.
got you into it. And then, so once that happened, once the social grouping started taking place, and you're finding other people, and they're bringing habits to you that you didn't even know were out there. They're, you know, here we've met together on, having some alcohol, but wow, cocaine. You know where to get some cocaine. You know where to. Oh, you can get some weed, and then the paraphernalia and all the different. It's a whole other subset of stuff that you start becoming interested in, and it becomes like a hobby, right? A hobby that I collect comic books today. And so I know a bunch of other people that collect comic books and do that. And that's what this was like. It was a hobby that you shared with other people. And you're bringing in, oh, well, that's a joint. Well, here's a bong. And then, oh, that's a bong. Here's a tutor. And just, you're just educating each other. And you're just kids, too.
Yeah.
That's what's crazy, is you're just kids.
And it's just you creating a counterculture, and it kind of goes. It's a rebellion thing, I think.
Mhm.
I'm my own man. I can choose. It's you can't tell me what to do. Obedience is relative, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But it's a common teenage thing. I think most teenagers go through it to one extent or the other. You were pretty extreme.
Yeah, and you have parents that are, of course, signs are starting to show among me and my friends. People are getting in trouble, little things are happening, little run-ins with, the school cop, or certain things are happening. So the attention's being kind of brought to it, but it's just the surface level, right? All the how much is actually happening versus what people are suspecting is huge.
Yeah.
Um,
Have you changed your attire? You're wearing the gangster clothes kind of thing, baggy
well,
pants and stuff.
so I had that little chip on my shoulder with religion and stuff. So I had to listen to Marilyn Manson, right? I had to listen to Marilyn Manson and
Yeah.
make sure everybody saw that I did, and
Yeah.
and doing just stuff like that. Ozzy Osbourne, Ozzy Osbourne was all the stories you've ever heard about him and the things that he's done. So it wasn't even that I liked Ozzy Osbourne's music. It was that this was a middle finger to,
Uh, to everything.
yeah, so stuff like that, and it was crazy. The parents, my parents, the parents of my friends, they would be telling us what to do, and we're not just like total animals or anything, right? We're going through the motions of making it through school and doing these things, so we're not just completely out of control. But you know who we are when we're around the parents, who we are when we're around the teacher, who we are and who we are most of the time when we're with each other, are starting to diverge into two separate people. And so I'm becoming really good at wearing masks and pretending to be this person while in reality these things are happening, and catching up to me. And who's the coolest parents on the block to me at this point? Who are the role models that I'm seeking, right? It's the parents that let us come over.
Yeah.
We'd rather you drank here and partied here than you're out doing
Yeah.
it somewhere we don't know. And so then that turns into that relationship, and now I'm getting advice, and I'm getting maturation counseling from people that are permitting teenagers to come and get messed up in their house, right? These are my role models now. These are the people
Yeah.
that I'm getting my guidance from.
You're starting a death spiral.
Yeah, for sure. So attendance at school starts to fall apart. I was a 4.0 student up until my junior year in high school. I had a 4.0 GPA, and then about my junior year, attendance just I'm maybe at school half the time. Um, I'm doing the things they used to call, and there was a recorded message that your son or daughter's missed one or more classes today. I figured out I'll just turn the ringer off on our phone at home, and mom will never know. And sure enough, she never did. And until report card time came, and the principal's reaching out and saying, "Hey, his attendance is horrible," and mom has no idea, right? And she's just going through this like questioning reality, like, who am I? Because I can put on such an act to her face, but then the reality of the situation always ends up catching up. And so one of the punishment type situations, you get to be 16, and she says you're going to have to figure out how to get your own car. I'm not going to help you. You've been in trouble too many times over and over again. And so I find one of my friend's dads, and trick him, not trick him, but talk him into um, that my mom won't help me get a car, sob story, all this stuff. And so he co-signs on a loan for me. And I pull up in my mom's driveway in a little sports car. And I said, "Well, you told me I had to figure it out myself, so I did." And she's just floored, right? Because here's
Oh
one of my
yeah.
friend's dads is basically undercutting her ability to discipline me, and it
Was
wasn't
that one of
even.
your party dads?
No, he wasn't a party dad, but he was somebody that I had, manipulated. Obviously, I'd convinced him that
That's a
woe is
pretty big
me.
convince.
Yeah, and I think he had a car that he was trying to get rid of at the same time. So he was like, "Well, I'll just help you by signing on the loan with you, and you just take it over." And it wasn't shortly thereafter I moved out of my mom's house. So 17 years old, it had gotten
Not
to where I'm not.
graduated.
No, I hadn't graduated high school yet. No, so things are to where she can't control me. I just wouldn't come home. I would, as far as punishment or anything, like I said, she would try to punish me, and I figure out my own way to take care of business. Um, and again, I think there was a thing about her where she didn't want to reach out and ask for help and expose that part of things, and so it was just kind of left that way. So at 17, I moved out of my mom's house, moved into an apartment with two of my friends, barely scraping by as far as, like I said, with school. So went and got some. Asked the school district, what do I need to graduate from high school? They gave me a bunch of options. I think I went and took like a ASVAB test for the military. Took a GED exam, which gave me the credits that I needed to finish high school, and then got an adult high school diploma. Essentially living in this apartment and drug
So
use.
if you're living on your own before you get to drug use, you had to be working somewhere. Where were you getting money?
Yeah, so I had a job. I had worked at an Arby's for about 2 years. Worked at this Arby's with all my best friends. The managers at the Arby's were guys that would buy us beer and let us hang out there at night after we'd shut down the store. Lost my virginity in the cooler on a stack of curly fries. That. So just this.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, just
Right
this.
there in Kaysville.
In Farmington, it used to be in Farmington. I don't think it's there anymore. I don't think that Arby's exists anymore. So
Okay.
yeah, it was in Farmington. And so I had worked at that Farmington. Got with a girlfriend too. I better put that in there. So a girlfriend that was the party lifestyle. We met at parties, doing that stuff, and um, about I don't know, probably 6 months to us being in a relationship together, we had taken some LSD, and she had had a real bad experience with that LSD, and it was almost immediately thereafter she said, "You know what? I'm not going to party like this anymore. I'm not going to do this stuff." And she changed her trajectory at that moment. But we stayed dating for the next 2 years. So I graduated high school. She was a year underneath me in high school, but we drug this thing out probably for another year and a half. We were together for about 3 years. So I was probably 19 years old, um, 19 going on 20, when she finally said, "I can't do this with you anymore." And she's going to college and doing these things. And so that was indicative of a lot of the relationships in my life at that time. Is there was people that I had met, and we had that party life in common, but you hit your 18, 19, 20 years old, and there's this natural divergence into, I'm going to start living a little bit more responsibly. I'm going to start doing stuff,
Yeah.
or going off the deep end, which I chose the deep end path. I wanted to keep partying. I didn't want to be told what to do. And you asked about employment and stuff. It was after I didn't have the stability of my mom's home. I didn't hold on to a job for very long after that. And then that's when selling drugs became an option, because not only would it keep the drugs going, but it would also provide for some money in my pocket. Um, Mom wasn't completely absent from my life. She was always there trying to help me pull out of this or pull out of that, and people call it enabling sometimes. But when I look back, my mom she just wanted the best for me. She tried every formula she could come up with of trying to figure out a way to in
That's
high
what parents do really, is they try
yeah
to figure out a way, but it is absolutely hard and almost impossible to bring someone like what you're describing, bring them back
yeah
until they've gone out and sowed their oats and come to themselves and say, okay, I'm done with this.
yeah.
So,
And so into my early 20s, I I get a couple jobs. I start getting into construction, because that's the natural progression of the stoner, right? As well, I should have gone to college. I wanted to go to college to be a film director. That was something, I wanted to get into advertising and stuff. That was the dream goal back then. But where I landed was a construction job, because it it paid more money than when I was making, doing fast food. And with the construction job, I'm going to the bar every Friday to pick up my paycheck. It's half of it's gone before I even make it out of the bar. The relationships that I have now are mostly the people that I've bought drugs from and that have continued down this kind of crazy path with me. And so when you start to have your sole relationships be with your drug dealer, most drug dealers are involved in some other, unchoice
crime.
behaviors as well. Yeah, and so that starts to seep into me too. And I explained to you early on, I had that criminal bug kind of in me. You could hear it when I was a kid, and so
Yeah.
I would see some of these things that they would do, uh, these little schemes and these little plots, and I would be like, man, if this guy can do it, then I could do it 10 times better. And so that becomes a new high and a new addiction, is committing these high crimes, these felonies, and getting away with them. And and then that becomes a part of your life. I have a hard time when people say I wouldn't have done all these things if I wasn't high. you know that wasn't my case. My case was getting high enabled me. It took away some of those inhibitions that I had, but that was in me. Those criminal ideas, and the idea that I should come out on top at the expense of others, that it's okay to hurt other people as long as they don't know that you're hurting them, or if they do eventually know that you're hurting them, you can come up with an excuse why. That's who I was, as a person. And so when I see a lot of people and that was the group of people I ran around with too. So when I hear a lot of people today say, well, the drugs made me do it. If I hadn't got on the drugs, I never would have done a lot of these things. I think there's I think there's a sliver of that antisocial behavior that gets exasperated by the drugs, and that's what it was for me. The drugs enabled me to look in the mirror and be okay with the liar that I had become, with the you know because I was a capable guy. That was the story that I heard my whole life. You have so much potential. You have so much potential. That's what teachers and everybody, as I'd get into these, you have so much potential. And I used to think that that was a compliment, and today I realized that it was not a
It
compliment.
was them trying to figure out how to help you not be stupid.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was where I'd gotten to, and so felonies started happening. I started on a daily basis. I'd get away with this, so I'd try it 2 or 3 more times, and then I'd try this, and that just became, and it got burglaries. I'm breaking into people's cars. I'm breaking into their garages. I'm still in, and these are strangers. These aren't people that I know have stuff in there. I'm getting this adrenaline rush out of that. I'm taking their checkbooks and their wallets out of their cars and stuff, and getting and going into people's homes while they're sleeping, right? And the thrill of that adrenaline rush that I'm standing there, I can see them sleeping in their bed, and I'm tiptoeing around in their house.
You're kidding me.
No, and the adrenaline rush of that was, and then I'm taking their checkbook and I'm going to their bank, and I'm pulling up to the drive-through window, and I'm using their ID because they don't know I'm out there. This was in the before our super digital age that we have today, right?
Right.
I'm out in the far lane of the drive-through, and I have their bank card and their ID, and the person in the bank doesn't know if I'm them or not. They're not checking stuff that close, and I'm taking money out of their bank accounts, and I'm doing, these are the schemes that I'm coming up with, and I'm getting away with it until eventually I don't. Until eventually it catches up to me because it's going on so much and so often, and mind you, my drug addiction, I've gone from being a, normal, average-looking Joe to, Schmiegel from
Yeah.
the Lord of the
Lord of
Rings.
the Rings.
I'm starting to take on some of those characteristics as I'm walking around town, and I'm thinking I'm looking like $1,000,000 too, right? But
So
I'm
you're using meth now at this
oh
point then?
oh yeah, nonstop,
Because that's a
intravenously.
typical meth addict. They think they're. I talked to a lady a couple of weeks ago. She was 7 years using meth. She thought she was gorgeous, and she had no teeth, and she had sores all over her body, and her hair was thin. And so that's interesting.
Yeah, and you're walking around and just thinking that you're cream of the crop. That, like, gosh, I'm
Yeah.
so smart. All these suckers they don't even know. And really, everybody's just looking at you like, what are you doing with your life?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, get arrested for my first misdemeanor, and I misdemeanor charge probably. I think I was 22 years old, for some shoplifting type stuff. And then shortly thereafter, I'm getting caught for felonies for forgery and, um, breaking and entering and some other stuff like that. And that gets me introduced to the criminal justice system. And so, first time in
First
jail,
time you. Yeah, I was gonna say first time you went to jail. What was that like? Davis
uh,
County.
it wasn't, yeah, it was Davis County Jail, and I think I was in there for probably, 2 weeks or something. It was a small thing. It was a little misdemeanor thing. I think my mom probably bailed me out of jail on that because I think that was the one and only time she was ever willing to do it. And it really was, it was scary in a sense, but not anything like when I went to prison for the first time. This was just kind of like an inconvenience. I was put out that I was in this environment. I think some of the things were hitting me because, you know, I didn't have an experience with this. I didn't come from a family that we had, I never
Right.
had an uncle on parole or cousins that were on probation or dealing with going in and out of rehab. I didn't have that in my family. So this was a new path for me, right? I had heard of it with the peers that I had, the new peer group that I had built for myself. They had, they were on probation or they were dealing with this or dealing with that, but I had never actually had firsthand experience of it. And so it was it was a whole bunch of other people just like me, um, getting stuck in a room together and sharing our stories of plotting and scheming, and you start to see this hierarchy of, and mind you, this is the county jail. This isn't prison. So you've just got kind of the local miscreants that you've crossed paths with some of them. You've done whatever, but all it's doing is now I'm like social networking this. I met 10 or 15 new people the first time I went to jail. And then when I see them out there in the circles, we know that we've been in jail together. It's like this, we built this camaraderie now.
It's
I'm in,
brotherhood.
yeah, I've arrived now. I'm in the club. I'm, some of my friends are working on their associate's degrees and their bachelor's degrees and stuff. And I'm slowly chipping away at my criminal career now.
Yeah.
And so it was,
Wow.
it was annoying. It didn't scare me into all. Really, all I just wanted to get out of there. That was it. and I would tell anybody what I needed to tell them. I would convince them, and you start learning these very manipulative tactics. The first few times that you're brought into jail, you learn how to say this to get this, how to shoot loopholes. It's a whole culture that you're living in. It's another new environment that you're going to have to survive in, and so you're learning those rules, and you're learning those things. And so, yeah. So first time in jail, probably out in 2 weeks to a month, something like that, and right back on my way back in. Started picking up felonies, and so the jail times start getting longer. I want to say I probably did 6 months, and then a year in county jail. And each time I'm getting out on probation, I'm not following the probation standards. I'm, immediately just going back and doing stuff. And then I ended up in Weber County Jail for a year. And
Well, while you're there, is there at this point in your life, is there any sense of, man, I got to fix this? Or are you just still running hard?
no.
This concludes part 1 of our interview with Jordon Holdaway. Join us next time as he describes his interactions with the Other Side Academy, his recovery, and the great work he's doing there. I want to thank you so much for listening and supporting the show. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating, a review, or a like, as it helps our show grow. Thank you so much.